Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I have Marcia Reynolds on with me. She has written a number of books. She has breakthrough coaching. She has a book called Coach the Person, Not the Problem. And the book we are going to talk about today, if you're watching the YouTube video, is The Discomfort Zone, how leader, and I'm going to read the subtitle because I think this is super important. How leaders turn difficult conversations into breakthroughs. And you can see all my little tabs here because I loved so many parts of it as I read it. So before we jump in, first, I wanted to welcome you to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Becca. I really appreciate you asking me to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. So I'd love you to share with everyone what has been your journey in coaching and leadership. Where did you start? I know you've gotten a bunch of like really awesome degrees. And what do you do
Mhm.
now?
Yeah. Well, actually, my career was one of those accidental careers where I ended up in pushing television sets around a hospital, but I was working for a training department. Yeah, my first master's was broadcasting, and that was the job I got. But my boss then decided to get her doctorate, and she dumped the whole department in my lap. And so all of a sudden, I was in charge of the training, and management training, and I'd never been a manager. And, so I was looking at all the programs and trying to do my best. But it led me then to get a second master's degree in adult learning instructional design, and that's when I just got really curious and obsessed with what really works in helping people to learn, and then grow. And I kept doing from there I ran training departments for two other global companies, and I would use what I was learning and all the new research around participative learning and engaging and all of that, and playing games. And people love my classes, they give me happy faces, but again, over time the retention and learning was not great. And it wasn't until the day I resigned my last job, somebody sent me this article on coaching, and I said, there's something different here. And I watched a coaching demo and I said, there's something different about learning, and so that's what kind of spawned my whole uh, curiosity and path, and got very involved with coaching early on. It inspired me to get my doctorate in the new neuroscience that was coming out to understand how coaching impacts the brain. And I believe coaching is the best learning technology we have right now, how it truly sparks the creative insights and can change the brain instead of just giving people facts that sit in their cognitive stew, and most of the time we forget. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm so passionate about coaching and how to use a coaching approach in leadership conversations, when we're teaching classes. So it's not just being a coach, but using a coaching approach. And that's what the book's about.
I love this. And you actually talk about the neuroscience of rapping
Yeah.
and how it relates to coaching. So I that's a fun little teaser for those folks. Let's later in the conversation.
Hmm.
But the thing I want to start with is you frame.
Hmm.
I'm going to read straight from your book here. You talk about typically how books about having tough conversations, right? um tend to focus on the speaker, right? So
Yeah.
it's helping someone deliver a message, right?
Hmm.
So it's I where you read those books and you get the skills as a speaker to
Hmm.
achieve something with the other person, right? Some kind of
Yeah.
outcome with the other person. And your book is different, and you say the focus shifts to the receiver, the person you are speaking with. You don't
Hmm.
have a message to deliver. You desire someone to expand his awareness, to see his situation and himself in a different light. You don't tell him what you want. You want him to discover, create, or unveil this new
Hmm.
reality on his own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really great.
Well, right. And actually, that's what uses the different part of the brain that
Mhm.
when I'm telling people, like, giving them feedback and, what would be better.
Mhm.
Most of the time, even do you know that the word feedback, when you go to someone and say, "Can I give you some feedback?" the response in the brain is actually the same as if you held a gun to their head.
Oh,
The
no.
stress response, the word feedback triggers a stress response, which shuts down the brain.
Yes.
And often then people will either comply or resist. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it changes their perspective,
Mm,
and I find that in learning, first off, I have to expand my perspective and also expand my sense of self. So, like, even when I'm working with a leader who's having a difficult time, managing their direct reports, I don't start by saying, okay, so, what behaviors did you do when you ran that meeting? I start by saying, so define leadership for me. And start to look at how does the person really see what is their responsibility? Who are they in that moment? Um, just as if even when you're talking about teachers, so define who you are. Are you the expert that must instill expertise in other people? Are you the facilitator of thinking? So my sense of self is even important. So getting people to talk about their perspective, to reflect back what you hear them saying, so they can see their thinking out here, helps them to then analyze what's good and bad in a way they cannot do for themselves.
Right.
So that was the shift of
Mhm.
understanding what really makes people learn is not pouring information at them, but getting
Right.
them to think differently.
Right, right, and that's
Mhm.
how we can, if we have conversations about that, if that's the framing of the
Yeah.
conversation, it
Yeah.
shifts from, "Oh, I have to have a tough conversation, and we're gonna make it through and hopefully
Mhm.
make something happen,"
Yeah.
to this
Hey.
breakdown is a
Mhm.
real golden opportunity for a breakthrough.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing. Like an example, I was working with this leader who um, was wanted to be promoted, but his boss said, like, well, your peers don't even see you as a leader. They really struggle with you when you run meetings. And the problem was, I said, again, who are you in those meetings? He says, well, I'm the one who knows the most about this area that we're working on. So he says, I'm the expert, I must give
Mhm,
my expertise. I said, so
mhm,
what is the purpose of the meeting? He says, well, we're trying to discover new solutions for this problem. I said, so you're telling them what it is to do instead of exploring new solutions.
mhm,
So tell me about exploring new solutions. How would you do that with people?
mm,
And so the recognition, well, I'm not really engaging them to explore, I'm telling
mm.
them what to do. There is a difference. I didn't have to tell him. He had to see it,
Yes,
you know?
exactly,
Right.
and
And
that's
and yeah, I said, when you talk, what happens in the room? What's the impact? He says, well, people kind of like don't talk anymore. I'm
yes,
like, oh, you want their ideas, but you're shutting them down.
yes,
So
exactly.
impact is also important. So again, just exploring with a person is so
Mm.
much more powerful than giving them suggestions, ideas, the benefit of your experience.
Mhm. I no, I love that. That's great.
Hmm.
So, I wanna kind of go into the nuances of how these conversations go. I think this
Hmm.
could be a great, a time for you to share how
Hmm.
neurologically, how
Yeah.
is coaching similar to rapping?
Yeah. Well, well, you know what I've been talking about, and there was some recent research where they even had a brain monitor on people who were problem solving, and um, these people, first they were given a room to sort through their problem on their own, and they managed the brain activity was minimal, and they had a button every time they had a new idea, a few ideas. Then they gave them a mentor who, gave them suggestions, advice, shared their own experiences, and the brain activity was about the same. Minimal. Some people had a little bit more, a few ideas, but then they gave them a coach to use reflection to help them see their thinking, to be their thinking partner, ask questions. And the brain activity was off the charts. But not only the brain activity indicated the middle of the brain, the creative center, where we have creative insights instead of the cognitive brain where we're analyzing and just thinking about what we're being told. The rappers, the study was with same thing. They had a brain monitor and was looking at brain activity, and they found that the rappers would start their rap in the cognitive space where they were kind of just getting going, and then all of a sudden the frontal lobe went quiet, and the creative middle center of the brain was spark, 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 spark. The activity was wild. Yeah, and then as they went to close off the wrap, it went back to the cognitive brain just to close it off. And I said, that's the same thing that happens in coaching. We start by getting very clear on what it is we're working on.
Mhm.
What is the end result that we want? What is the situation? That's a cognitive exploration. But then you get into exploring with the person, well, what else is possible that could get the result you want? And the middle brain went spark, 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 like the rappers. And then at the end, when you get a commitment to action, you go back to the cognitive brain.
Yeah.
So rapping and coaching are very similar.
I love this so much. I will now be sharing this this brain study and brain science because I think it's fantastic. So it makes me think of, right, how do we, what are the actual actions of a
Yeah.
coach that's
Uh,
causing that creative spark, spark, spark? And it makes me think of
mhm.
questioning and listening, right? And you and I have talked about how do
Yeah.
we know what to say? It's actually from
Mhm.
listening. So I'd love you to share
Yeah.
about that. What's that relationship?
Yeah. Well, and when we were talking before, I said my process is called reflective inquiry.
Mhm.
And when I went back to find who coined that term, I found that it was John Dewey, the educational reformer in the early 1900s, who wrote a book called How We Think in 1910 that defined coaching. And he wanted teachers to use this technique in the classroom to get young children to even explore their thinking, like where did their beliefs come from? Were they just inherited from their parents? And what evidence might indicate a different belief? But that was how they do that, is to reflect back. So
Mhm.
in a difficult conversation, you might start by just outline the situation. So like in the classroom yesterday, in one sentence, you were doing this, and then the impact, it's more important the impact than the actual behavior. The impact was there wasn't a lot of engagement. People, didn't seem to be, the students didn't seem to be that interested. And then you say, would you be willing to explore with me how you might get better engagement? So you name the goal. And then you immediately go into, so tell me, what is it you think is most important for you to do at that moment? And start to listen to their story. And the reflection comes before the question, where I would just say, okay, so here's what I hear you saying, and just summarize what you hear. So you bring their thinking out here so they can actually look at their thinking. Because then they see, possible gaps in logic or assumptions that they're making up. If they tried something different, what would happen? The things, the shoulds, every time the person used should, who says should? Where did the should come from? So you share what you're hearing and then you ask the questions. It makes them really think,
Mhm.
about what they're doing and what else is possible in a much more powerful way in the middle brain than if you just say, give them advice and how would you use that? Which
Mhm.
is again a cognitive process. And when they go to sleep, the brain's probably going to throw it out anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think about, it's we're asking questions, we're repeating back what they're saying to us first. I think
Right.
that is so not only powerful to help someone hear and see their thinking,
Yeah.
It is also helpful to signal to the brain that they are still safe. And so,
Yeah.
like, constantly signaling to the brain that they are safe. One thing I often say in my trainings is it doesn't matter if you think you're trustworthy, it matters if they think you're
Yeah.
trustworthy. You know, we don't want to
Absolutely.
assume trust and we don't want to assume safety.
Yeah.
And so, and I think in unfortunately today's school climate where we have a culture of compliance in
Mhm.
schools, it can feel unsafe to be in inquiry as an adult,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Mhm.
And so, as we are having teachers be in inquiry to strategically and intentionally build in opportunities to constantly signal to their brain that they're safe is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of safety that then builds trust is when people feel seen.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're saying, that when we really are listening and sharing back, summary, I think this is what you're saying, um, uh, and trying to understand what they really want to create, that people feel seen because you're sharing what in their words what they're saying,
Mhm.
instead of interrupting and saying, yeah, okay, but let me tell you this. It's like, let me spend a moment with you and let you know I hear you. I
Mhm.
hear you and I am here for you.
Mhm.
Those two things create that safety
Mhm.
with whoever it is that we're talking to. So
Mhm.
even just using a coaching approach creates that safety and then openness to learning.
Yeah.
Because you have to have safety in order to create the openness. Then
Mhm.
I am open to learn and willing to grow, but I have to feel safe with you that you're here for me
Mhm.
before I will do that.
So one of the things that you talk about in your book is about the person coaching needs to do the work first to make sure
Mhm.
that that we are coming with curiosity
Yeah.
and non-judgmentally. You talk about the thinking brain, the heart brain. Tell me if I'm saying
Mhm.
this right. Thinking brain, heart brain, and gut brain. Is that
Mhm.
correct? The three
Yeah.
brains.
Yeah.
And that I highlighted it somewhere. I don't know if I can find it now. You said, like, look, the goal is for us to first of all become self-aware. What are we coming with in those three
Yeah.
brains? What are our thoughts, our
Mhm.
feelings, and our gut, our instincts? Is that correct?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's intention. Yeah, what are
yeah,
we
yeah,
coming with is what's your intention here? Is your intention to make somebody do something, or
right.
is your intention to truly explore with them what's possible?
Right. And that's the difference between if you're going in to make someone do something,
Mhm.
the best you could get is compliance.
Right.
The worst you could
Or
get is
resistance.
resistance, right.
Yeah,
You can
right.
the 2 choices are compliance or resistance
Mhm.
versus a breakthrough,
Yeah,
right? And that's like
right.
a whole world, right?
Yeah.
You could some of our greatest resistors are our greatest advocates
Yeah.
when we when we actually have a breakthrough, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I wanted to highlight that but before I think of kind of the 3 stages of causing results. There's what we think, which
Mhm.
causes our actions,
Mhm.
which, there's like I guess in your context is thinking, feeling, right?
Mhm.
There's all that world that's invisible to us. There's
Mhm.
thinking that causes our actions that causes results, right? And
Mhm.
if we are reading books that just tell us a new action, tell me what to say to cause a new result, we're skipping that thinking, that
Mhm.
internal environment that is actually the source of
Mhm.
us
Mhm.
causing
Mhm.
a breakthrough or not, right? The result starts with the coach.
Yeah. Well, again, that intention, but the intention is emotional too, that I really am here for the person.
Mhm.
And, opening up the head, heart, and gut. This is the nervous system. It's all connected,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
it's not like
Yeah.
these separate places or, this is like woo woo stuff. My gut and my heart are constantly sending signals to my brain. And oftentimes when people say something like that, and I have an instant judgment, this is along my nervous system, and there's tenseness in my body, or, things that um, might irritate me, but I'm not, I send it to my brain because my brain is the only thing that has translation into words,
Mhm.
but if I totally open my heart with, I care about you, I really want I believe in you, I want to see you succeed. And my gut is, and I'm going to have the courage to be present, stay with you, and let you talk.
Mhm. Mhm.
That we go into the conversation fully open. And there's research that shows when we fully open our head, heart, and gut, there's an energetic exchange where the person feels totally safe with you.
Mhm.
They have found this in therapeutic presence with therapists that work with trauma patients, that that energetic exchange just by me coming in fully open, and wanting to be with you and to help you grow. People feel that our mammalian brain says,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, I'm
Mhm.
safe."
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting. It's without words that we create that, and so it's really important that the coach works on, how do I do that? And
Mhm.
so there's instructions in the book. There's instructions on my website under resources, of how to open your head, heart, and gut before you go in, so you're fully present and they feel that right away. And I just want to add on to that, that energetic exchange and the resonance that it creates, that's going to be really hard to replicate with AI.
Mhm. Mhm. That
So
is
we are not
true.
going to lose our jobs to
Mhm.
AI if we
Mhm.
really coach at that level.
Mhm.
So it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and I think about intentionally creating our way of being,
Hmm.
right, and coming from an authentic way of being, right, and the first,
Yeah.
thing we need to
Absolutely.
do is look at ourselves. So I really wanted to, before we go into, you have a step, kind of a step by step process of going through this conversation, right, how to dream together.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about that, but before we do, I just really wanted to highlight the first step is always that we look at ourselves and what
Hmm.
resistance and what judgments do we have in
Right.
ourselves before we do any work out here, right? Because
Yeah.
um, this is about the receiver and not about what
Yeah.
I do, right? It's about actually how they receive
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And even if you've had trouble with this person before and you think go and you're going into like, ugh, they're going to be so resistant or whatever, you got to let that go and say, okay, today's the day they're going to be different.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, and be
There's,
more. Go
yeah,
ahead.
there's Meg Wheatley quotes a Buddhist monk who said, if you haven't seen someone for 5 minutes, you don't know them.
Mm,
So just look at even your assumptions of the person. Can you let that go? And use beginner's mind as this person is new today, woke up different, as
mm,
we all do. So
mhm.
let me go into this with all possibility that this is going to be a wonderful conversation. You've
Yeah.
got to go in with that first. And that I care about this person, because if you don't care about them, they're going to know it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing that
Yeah.
I say to myself to really come from, authenticity and commitment is I ask myself, what am I more committed to? Being right about my
Oh,
judgments
absolutely.
or making a difference, right? And
Yeah.
I have to sit
Very
sit with that for
good.
a second. What am I more committed to? Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to,
Very good.
almost like let go of the stick to let go of the righteous stick. I'm right about
Yeah.
them being blah
Yeah.
blah blah, right? To
That's
like,
right.
well, I'm actually just more committed to making a difference for them. So
Mhm.
in the name of making a difference, right? I will
Absolutely.
give up my
Yeah.
judgments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I would love to talk about your acronym
Mhm.
DREAM.
Mhm.
And it stand can you tell us like what it is, how when do we, go through
Yeah.
these steps and what are the steps of DREAM?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I wrote that acronym, I've moved on to some other acronyms.
Oh, I would love to hear those
And,
too.
but let me just say that the overlap is always, the D is, the desired outcome. What is it that we really want to achieve, that we agree to? And no matter what model you use, that's um, it's got to start with that. It's like Stephen Covey said, start with the end in mind. So when I had said before about if you're giving feedback, just briefly say, so, this is what happened. in that meeting or that class. But get to the outcome. And the outcome was, people shut down or there wasn't a lot of engagement. The energy seemed to decrease in the room. Um, and then to say, I know that you really want to engage people, to make a difference, to have them inspired. Is that your outcome as well? So could we spend some time looking at how to achieve that outcome, and you keep that outcome in mind. So when people, might start to argue, yes, but I need to give them all this information first, and um, to come back to, yes, but we agreed that the outcome was that you would find a way to engage better, to inspire more. So that becomes the stake in the ground, is the outcome that we're working on, and to keep coming back to that. That's the thread in the conversation, and that's going to lead to the end, to any goals that might be set.
Mhm.
Okay. So once you do that, then you get into the reality. Then you're asking them, so how do you see this? What do you think what happened? Who are you in that moment? Who is it that you think you need to be? Who is it that you think they want you to be?
Mhm.
And let's look at that gap. So we listen to their reality, and share that back. So that's the R, to summarize what we hear. And then we can explore and acknowledge what they're saying. And those words come up in all my models, to explore, what does that mean to you? Why is that important? What is actually the most important um, thing that we want to focus on in this moment? Um, what might stop you from making that
Mhm.
change? Because changing who I am in the moment is even more difficult than what I do. So if I see myself as the expert that must give information, to come back to the facilitator of thinking, I have to let go of who I thought I was. And that's a scary process. That's where coaching really comes in, to be with them as they change who I think I am,
Mhm.
because there's uncertainty in changing my sense of self. So exploring and acknowledging what they're saying, so again, using reflection, appreciating where they are right now and what it's going to take for them to make the change, is really important. And then always leading to making sure there's a commitment, so once they have an insight, yeah, okay, I get it, that I need to change who I am in that moment, to really be the inspiring
Mhm.
facilitator of thinking instead of
Mhm.
the expert deliverer of information. Um, to ask then, once the insight is there, what will you do to ensure that happens? And ending is always, what will you do, by when will you start this? You got to say when, because
When?
if they
Yep.
don't give you a commitment like, okay, I'm going to try this next week or whatever, then it probably won't happen. And could anything get in the way, um, of is there anything else you need to support you in making this change?
Yep.
So
I love
that's
it.
the acronym. And,
Yes.
and everything I've done since then still really focuses on outcome, exploration, appreciation, and acknowledgement of what they're saying, and the goals at the end. Yeah.
And I hear throughout, it's like you reflect, 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 right? This
Yeah.
just, it's every step, there's a reflection. You're reflectively listening right back to them, reflecting
Yeah.
back to them what they're saying, right? Like you're safe
Absolutely.
now, like say, part of it, right? There's that dual purpose. We're
Mm.
getting the thinking out here,
Yeah.
out of both of our brains, out here,
Mhm.
and constantly signaling to the brain, you're safe now, you're safe now, you're safe now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. I hear you. I appreciate what you're saying. Doesn't
Mhm,
matter if I agree with you,
mhm, mhm,
that
mhm,
this is the way you see it now. I appreciate that this is your perspective today.
mhm.
Um, and I've, over the years, mm, nearly 3 decades now as being a coach, have found that the reflection is even more important than question. The question is add on to the reflection.
That's
So
powerful.
Yeah, because I was not taught that. It just through the years have found how important that is to engage them in their thinking
Mhm.
in all of
Yeah.
our conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. A huge part of my work is I have folks reflectively listening constantly throughout
Mm.
throughout and they're like, again. I'm like, again, do it with
Yeah,
everyone. And they cause incredible results in their marriages, with their relationships with their children,
absolutely.
certainly with the teachers they work with. And it's shocking to them. Like, how could me just reflecting back what they
Yeah,
say
yeah,
cause
it's so
that result?
simple. It's almost
Yeah.
too simple.
Yeah.
And what I want to say too, this isn't about parroting,
Mhm. Right.
and telling them, okay, so this is what you're saying, and then you give them back exactly what they said. It really is a summary of key ideas.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard you. I hear what's most important. A
Yes.
concise reflection is really critical at that
Yes,
point.
yeah, exactly. One of the
Mhm.
things you said, we're talking about creating safety in conversations because especially in the world of having quote unquote tough conversations, right?
Mhm.
Or being uncomfortable, having uncomfortable, right? Conversations.
Mhm.
Um, you talk, this is you say you need to maintain the safety bubble no matter what emotions are expressed.
Yeah.
I put a star next to it,
Mhm.
because you don't name it this way, but, having toxic positivity
Mm.
can really impact the, level of safety, and I think in our sometimes we
Mhm.
can glaze over things, and, you have quotes that I was like, "Yes, I think people really say this, 'It'll all turn out fine. You'll
No.
figure it out.'" Right? And
Yeah.
that's
You
all
just
it not
discounted the
only in
person.
our own
Yeah.
discomfort, we
Yeah.
can say things like that as the
Yeah.
coach, we
Yeah.
can say things like that, and what we don't realize, in our
Mhm.
own attempt to make ourselves feel comfortable or relieve the stress for the moment, we are making it unsafe or
Yeah.
feel not,
Mhm.
a fact, but feel unsafe for the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that mm, you're discounting what they're saying,
Yeah.
by that. But to be able to allow people to feel what they feel, that there's no bad emotion, So one of my my Marcia isms is, you aren't there to make them feel better. You're there to help them to see better.
Mm,
So don't jump in and try to fix them, because you make them weak, and then they feel bad, and then they feel guilty that they made you feel bad, and so if somebody has an intense emotion like sadness, or embarrassment, or maybe even anger, to just let them go through it. There's an arc to all emotions. There's the trigger, there's the intensity, and then it diminishes.
mm,
So allowing people to process what they're feeling, and you'll energetically feel if you stay present and don't get wrapped up in their emotions.
mhm,
You'll feel when it's starting to diminish, and then you just come in and say, "Would you be willing to share with me what just occurred, or what's coming up for you now? What are you now seeing?"
yeah.
So you continue the conversation without making them wrong for the emotions they have.
Mhm,
Which also means we have to really learn and practice emotional intelligence.
yeah.
That also comes back to your statement, what must the coach do?
Mhm,
It's to be able to recognize when I have a trigger in my body, a point of tenseness, to
mhm,
breathe in, release it, and come back to care for the person,
mhm.
so I don't get wrapped up in how I feel
Mhm.
in that
Exactly. That's
moment.
exactly it. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love, thank you for pointing that out. So we're gonna have to wrap up this conversation. This is
Mhm.
really fun for me. Is there anything you would love to leave the coaches and leaders listening to this with about this content, about having important breakthrough conversations with folks?
Yeah. Well, I think that I came up um, initially with the concept with the writing of Discomfort Zone, is that they truly want you to be present more than they need you to be perfect.
Mm,
That your presence, that you show how much you care and want to be there and want to help them, is really more critical than I've got to get this right. Like you were saying, the difference between right and making a difference.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
working on my presence, my open, curious, compassionate presence, is critical.
I love that, being present over being perfect. That's really great. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing all of your beautiful neuroscience knowledge with us. I'm super geeky about that. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you.